Hey there, don't go away. Kevin Sheedy will join us on Talking Footy right after this break. Welcome back to Talking Footy. Without doubt, one of the major talking points of the last week has been the bitter feud between two of the game's legitimate legends, Robert Walls and Kevin Sheedy. Last Monday, Robert wrote an article about Tony Liberatore, which caused great debate in the broader football community. At a press conference to promote the round 3 clash between Carlton and Essendon, Bomber coach Kevin Sheedy had this to say.
A lot of people are very righteous. I mean, there are a lot of snipers out there in the 1970s and 80s, and all of a sudden now they're trying to say, I mean, you know, let's clean the game up. And some of those blokes are now writing articles and making comments. I said, felt like saying the other, weekend, I said all snipers weren't in Vietnam in the 70s.
Well, the common belief was that Kevin Sheedy was referring indirectly to Robert Walls with his comments about snipers. When Robert had this put to him last Tuesday night on Talking Footy, this is what he had to say.
I reckon it might have been me.
Name names though, couldn't he?
But if it was me, he should have had the courage to say so.
Well, the feud simmered throughout the week. Robert in Wednesday's Age wrote a column naming the most overrated player on each club's list. Stephen Alessio was the Bomber mentioned. This clearly irked Kevin Sheedy. Robert followed up on Saturday with glowing praise for Wayne Britton's coaching in Carlton's upset win over Essendon, highlighting Britton's capacity to keep his eye on the ball, something which again seemed to annoy Kevin Sheedy. And by Saturday, it had reached boiling point, as we all found out on Melbourne radio station 3AW.
I'll talk to you about plumbers and teachers on Tuesday night.
Well, 65% winning ratio to compare to your middle 30s. Good luck to you. Doesn't worry me.
I tell you what, I'll talk to you about that on Tuesday night
well,
too.
Maybe you went to Brisbane and hit, pal. See you later.
Kevin, welcome. Welcome to the program.
It's a pretty tight session, wasn't it?
How do you feel about it now? I mean, you were obviously pretty upset on Saturday.
Oh, look, I've been probably upset a fair while about Robert and some of the things he said at a coaching conference early this year, and probably it's the first time I've spoken to him, so I'll let him have it.
That conference was written this morning, Caroline Wilson's article. Was that an absolutely accurate article from your point of view?
Well, I'd have to say the person I spoke to that was at the conference said to me that Robert was fairly, well, I'd have to say that, not a really good coach, overrated coach, those sorts of comments, and it went further and further. And I thought to myself, well, gee whiz, if that's what a coaching conference is about, then look out when I get my first chance.
Let me say here, I spoke at that coaches' conference. I never said you were overrated. And you can talk to Alan Jeans about that because he was at my side. What I did say was that whilst you've coached 20 years, it's narrow experience because you've only ever coached at the one team. I was talking to a group of 30 players who were all around the 29, 30 age mark, all looking to coach in the future, and I was talking to them about the pitfalls of going to clubs where you didn't get much support. And some of those players will take on those jobs because they'll be desperate to do it. And I've had the experience of being at bottom of the ladder clubs. Twice I took on wooden spoon teams. And I also know what it's like to coach at a team that gives you every support. And what I said was, you've been at the one club for 20 years, at a club that's given you every support. I didn't say you were overrated. And as I said, Alan Jeans was there.
Well,
you ask Alan.
Yeah, I've only got to interview probably the next 30 guys are going out, prospective coaches, and from my point of view, I wasn't too pleased with it. I'll trust the people that I spoke to as far as that. And look, coaching's not easy. It doesn't matter whether you stay in a club for 20 years. It is a very, very hard journey to stay in a club 20 years. And
no doubt about that.
Very, very difficult. And I know that going to Brisbane is very, very difficult too, particularly where you ended up in the Gold Coast. But, you know, when the rules changed between VFL to AFL, we were at least the one club, Essendon, that gave Brisbane 7 players, of which at least 4 or 5 are fairly good players. At each time, yourself asked for myself or the team to come up and play in Cairns or Maroochydore. We were the only ones probably that went. I remember distinctly the Cairns game. So I thought that, you know, there's a lot of aspects to coaching other than just winning a game of footy, and that's probably where I'm coming from in regard to our club has gone all over Australia to support footy. And as a coach, you've got to convince your board whether you should do it. Now, when that comes back at a seminar and you're there to promote coaching, and hopefully these guys are going to be great coaches. When I heard what I heard, I was pretty savage, I'll be honest.
Well, you say there have been 2 jobs, in my opinion, in the last 20 years where a coach gets every support, and that's been at Carlton. And I had that job for 4 years, so I know what it's like to be able to drive in the driver's seat of a Rolls-Royce, as you've done. I think you've been a good coach, let me say that from the start. But you have no idea what it's like to take on a wooden spoon team. And for you to say that he went to Brisbane and hid, that's offensive and insulting.
Well, it can be offensive.
Let me tell you, you wouldn't know what it was like to have an owner of a club who wanted to close it down every second week. You wouldn't know what it was like to have 90% of your players who come from outside that state are homesick, don't get opportunities because no one's interested in Aussie rules up there. You wouldn't know what it was like to go to your own bank and pull money out to pay your best and fairest winner because the club couldn't afford it. So you don't know really, you haven't got a broad experience of coaching. You've been at the one club for 20 years. Malthouse has got a broad experience because he's coached the Bulldogs for 6 years. Middle of the road battling club when he was there. He then took on the West Coast Eagles,
were at the start of the 80s?
And then he took on Collingwood. So he's seen football from 3 different clubs and 3 different angles. All I'm saying is that you haven't seen
at the start
anything
of the
but
80s?
one view, which is a pretty good one.
Where do you think Essendon were at the start of the 80s? They had not won a final. They hadn't beaten Carlton for a decade. They wouldn't know and didn't know at one stage what it was like to win a final for something like 13 or 14 years. We cleared 70% of the list by the time we won the 84 premiership. So every coaching job has a difficulty.
I think the surprising thing for an outsider is
every coaching job has a difficulty.
You both seem to have been very successful. I mean, Kevin is a legendary coach from an outsider's point of view, who's won 4 premierships and has been at a club for 21 years now, which I think is a very valued thing. And Robert, you've taken on 4 clubs. You've took Fitzroy from bottom to the finals. You were in 2 consecutive grand finals at Carlton. And we're also very successful in getting Brisbane into its first final. From an outsider's point of view, it's surprising, this argument, because we would think that you've both been very successful in your own way. Kevin continuing to be, and you now in a very different role.
It depends how you view success as a coach. And I guess that's one of the things that, you know, I pumped at that coaching conference, because in the time that I was at Brisbane, the percentages were way down, but that didn't matter because what you were doing was building something so that it could go on. In many ways, I regard my time at Brisbane as being more successful than when I coached Carlton, with players that you could bring in from outside, which you could do in the 80s. You could buy them, and Carlton and Essendon could buy them.
I feel I have to go into the past, and I don't really want to, but we've all read Mike Sheehan's articles, and we read Caroline today, which was you've talked about already. Between you, won 6 premierships in 7 years between 1968 and 74. Kevin 3 with Richmond, you 3 with Carlton. You were at each other's throats. I mean, is there something from those playing days that is still simmering here between the two of you?
Point of view. Personally, I'm not from my point of view. I mean, we enjoyed the competitiveness of each other and both sides, but, you know, I thought that when you go to talk at a coaching seminar, you should be totally positive all the way through.
Yeah.
Because you're developing the
Kevin,
next
we
batch of
find it
coaches.
hard to believe that the coaching seminar, and I know you've said this, that what Robert allegedly said about you with this coaching seminar.
One or 2 other things, but I
the
I
only
didn't
reason
appreciate
that
Robert's burst on Dennis Pagan, who's never missed the finals before. And here I am going to finally, gee whiz, you know, finally got back in the finals ourselves, and here's poor Dennis copping a barrage.
What didn't you like about the Dennis Pagan story? Because I would think that it's proven to be correct.
We actually mentioned that North should, well, gee whiz, it's a hard call. The guy's given everything, the players.
Of course he has. I think Dennis Pagan has been a wonderful coach, but I reckon Dennis, and this was what my article about, Dennis needed to change his ways. He had an ageing group of stars. He spelled them over summer. He got rid of some assistant coaches and brought in fresh voices. He's recruited young for the first time in a long time. But those things have all happened over the last 6 or 7 months.
This is exactly the same thing that happened to me after 7 or 8 years at Essendon. And we've been able to get back up there and get into another 3 or 4 grand finals and 2 preliminary finals where you get beaten by a point. Well, but, you know, you're up in that top 3 or 4 on another 5 or 6 occasions, whatever. It's very, very hard calling, Dennis.
Kevin, we, in the media...
Hard to be successful.
No doubt. In the media and as football enthusiasts, we find Robert Wall's articles refreshing, enlightening. illuminating. I get the feeling that you're objecting to the fact that he's been in the inner sanctum, like you are now as a coach, and is telling us the things that you probably don't want us to know about.
No, that's not right at all. I just think that he's a very critical person. I don't think he writes enough positive articles, and probably I'm a more positive person. I try never to write like that. I mean, I know he's a journalist now, and...
Kevin, in the last week, you were the, I reckon, the official and the unofficial ambassador for the game of football in Australia, and yet we had... I really felt it was unedifying to hear you having to flaunt your record.
Well, I mean, Dennis said the
radio.
same thing last year too, don't forget, that I'll retire with my record. I mean, sometimes that happens. I mean, a lot of people think out there that whatever Robert says is the absolute, that's it in coaching. Robert Walls and myself are very different personalities, okay? And we coach differently, and we think about football differently. And a lot of people in the press don't look at that. So, you know, you have an opinion, and that's great. But when you really understand the different personalities and the different styles of coaches out there, and Robert has done well as a coach, and so have I, but it's not the only way. And when I read and when I listen, and he does write some great articles, and he does make some terrific comments now on the television, but it's still just that one way. And I think there's another group of coaches out there that perhaps don't coach like Robert, and I'm one of them.
Would you agree that you've behaved in a rather irrational manner over the last week?
I think we both have, because I still think that Robert shouldn't have said what he said at the coaching seminar.
And what has your club said to you over the last few days? Would they rather you just...
Well, no, I think they just make sure that you simmer it down and let's get on with the job of coaching, which is what we've got to do. But I still don't think that really, when it's all said and done, that there are a lot of different styles of coaches.
There was no animosity between you two from your playing days?
Not at all.
Did you know each other socially then? Did you...
Oh, we knew each other. Look, I've got no problem with the playing days.
No.
And Kevin would be amazed, actually, at the similarities of our backgrounds. Because you talk about the Paran days and the streets and all of that sort of stuff. I was doing the same thing in Brunswick at the same time.
Is this plumbers and teachers, is it?
Well, they're different personalities, different styles. I don't pretty much taught and told by, you know, people out there that are very structural in regard to the process of how to play a game of footy, how to run a game of footy. I mean, you know, there are strengths on either side of different types of coaches where we're coming from. And one of mine happens to be getting good players.
Kevin, one of the things I find hard to understand is that why didn't you ring Robert Walls up after that coaches' conference privately and say to him, Wallsy, we've got a problem, let's go and have a coffee and sort it out?
Well, why would I have to ring Robert Walls up every time I've got a problem with him?
Well, that seems to be the big problem.
I'll be ringing you up every week.
It's better than going on television and calling him a sniper, isn't it?
Well, I never said that, so be very careful about that. Because, you know, that's a very difficult...
everybody who heard that comment
that's a typical...
believed you. You weren't referring to Robert Walls?
No, that's the Herald Sun writing exactly about age writers, and I thought you would have known that.
Who were you inferring was a sniper?
All the articles, all the comments by all the players in the 70s and 80s, which covers a hell of a lot of people.
None of them are right.
Kevin, you can't back away from back away from the fact that you were talking about Robert Walls.
Well, you must have been thinking it, were you?
Everybody knew you were talking about
Well, I
Robert.
never named Robert Walls. He just jumped on it. I mean, that's... I
don't know any other player from the 70s and 80s who was writing articles about Tony
What a terrible mistake to do.
Do you think...
Don't talk in riddles. Answer the question, and the question is...
Robert, I never mentioned your name.
Was I a sniper?
All the 70s and 80s, that people out there making the comments. And if I said on the radio, if the hat fits, then we all will.
I think
and
it's
I
a bit
wrote about
sad.
myself.
It's just a bit sad that you go so far with your bluff, and when your bluff's called, you back off.
Well, in what way?
Well, you just won't name me.
Well,
and
why should I?
I don't mind if you name me, to tell you the truth. It doesn't worry me. The one thing I would say, and I don't know whether you think this way or not, we both played in a pretty tough era with good teams and pretty solid expectations from most of us. Now, we did things in those days, 60s and 70s, that...
wouldn't stand up today.
Well, I look back on it now, and it's not something I'm not particularly proud of, some of the things that I did. And I would like to think that our sons and our grandsons can play on a safer field than we did. I think that's important. So that's how I see it. Look, we did things because that was the expectation then, but for goodness sake, we've gone on a third of a century since then.
Yeah, well, we all coach differently.
Sheets, were you toey coming in tonight?
I felt I was coming to a tribunal. And I want to have one of them last year. But look, to be quite honest, at least I put on the table, at least I spoke to him on the radio, and that's what I felt. Now, what jumped out, and I've been holding that inside. But, you know, Robert's got footy every week. He's had 4 matches this weekend. He's got the radio, he's got the microphone, he's got the pen. And we only have a comment every probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes, twice a week.
You've got your own column sheets in this.
Well, but I don't write negative.
Well, maybe
I'm a very
Robert,
positive
maybe
writer.
you're rattled by the fact that he's a bit more accurate than some...
that?
Robert.
In what way?
Well, I mean, maybe the fact that, as Bruce said earlier, Robert's come out of one world and into another, and he's writing about the game in a more honest...
Honest? You're saying coaches are dishonest?
Well, you
Are
are
you?
sometimes after games, certainly, in a more honest and occasionally brutal, occasionally glowing fashion than any other
It's not an easy game.
former coach player has before.
Coaching's not easy.
It's not. Look, it's not an easy game.
Exactly.
And last week, in the days leading up to a very big game for you, did you take your eye off the ball?
Well, I don't think I did because I made 3 comments, which took about a minute each.
Kevin,
3
whoever
minutes.
you were referring to about the Liberatore Knights article, the article that I wrote, you obviously were not happy with it. And I was unhappy about a behind-the-play incident. You yourself were unhappy about a behind-the-play incident last year.
That's right.
And you made your thoughts well known when you came on the
Absolutely,
field.
because I saw the player, I was standing right next to him, the doctor said, with 90 seconds to go before the siren, I think he's got a busted cheekbone and he cannot see out of one eye. Now, that's the doctor telling me. Then the siren goes. So, you know, very, very difficult position to be in, isn't it? When
Well,
one of your players are there.
Oh, I understand
So
that, but you don't like somebody else prepared to write about a behind-the-play incident, but you're happy to jump out and give your thoughts.
Yeah, defend my player.
So
Absolutely.
you could,
Not bad.
you could understand what Danny Frawley did with Knights.
Oh, I could, quite easily.
Is there anything you regret, Sheet? I get the feeling you wish you hadn't gone on AW now.
Oh, that was probably fairly harsh on Robert,
Yep.
I'd say, yeah. But, I mean, look, Robert said,
Yeah.
you know, Robert's been out there and, you know, he's coached and he knows how hard it is and he's had his training drills. I mean, you know, something will jump up in the next week or two and it'll bite us all on the bum and all of a sudden you wish it hadn't happened.
Three-quarter time...
And it will happen.
Kevin, you led by 11 points at three-quarter time. The game was up for grabs. It was tight, wasn't it? It was interesting you took charge of the coaching at three-quarter time. None of the assistants. God, Sheed, you were very animated and you could see that you were...
Most coaches are at three-quarter time, aren't they?
Well...
Not everyone, but I'd say most.
I haven't seen you like this for a little while.
Well, it's only 3 weeks into this season. But, you know, well, we're ahead of all the changes, and only just. I mean, everybody talked about flooding, and yet we were the ones that were doing the flooding in the first quarter.
But
No one understood that.
Going back to Caroline's question, did the whole week... Was it a burden for you on Thursday night at all, the rest of the week?
No. 21 years.
Not at all?
No, well, I just go
You
back
carried
home.
none of that with you into that game?
No, you don't. I mean, the hardest part, really, in the end was, to be quite honest, is Carlton made 3 changes a half hour before the game. And that was very difficult to coach with.
I think you were distracted. I think you were distracted in the days leading up to the game.
Caroline,
and
you wouldn't know.
Well, Kevin, I know that you were very, very upset about Robert and that you have been for some time. And I don't believe that 3 comments over 3 minutes were the amount of time you spent stewing over Robert Walls last week.
Oh, I think that you have 3 changes a half hour before the game, and they're very, very good players.
I'm not suggesting that's why you were beaten, by the way.
I'm just letting you know that it's very difficult. You've never coached, and you've got to understand that.
Where do we go from here? I mean, this is personal, I know, but in the relationship between the two of you, I mean...
I think we're probably like the 2 guys with the hose over the fence. Just
Oh, the
squirting
ad.
each other. Yeah, I thought it would be played tonight. Well, I thought it would be fantastic just to see it.
There's a lot of the old showgirl in Sheeds,
We
isn't there?
actually used to be neighbours for 20 years.
Just pour the hose over the fence.
Were you in the same street?
Same suburb.
Same suburb. Who shifted?
I did.
Good idea.
I had to get out.
There wasn't a sort of renovation.
Wasn't big enough for 2 of us.
Was there?
No.
A good idea.
I think Shimblebush lived around the corner and Denchi and the other boys.
Have you ever had a drink?
No. Well, I don't think so.
You've had a cup of tea. You came
Oh, it's come around
you
your
came
place,
around and asked me a few ideas.
Yeah. About writing. So, we start again and...
No, I sort of want to keep going. I want to talk about the game slightly, but I feel
Well,
as
we
if
think we should, shouldn't we? I mean, we've had ours.
Well, okay, we'll
You
now...
want to get on with life, I'm quite happy with that, but
you wouldn't shake hands and make up, would you?
we just did before the show.
Oh, did you? I didn't see it.
I know, see, you don't see everything.
That's for sure.
Would you
No,
have a cup of tea with him now, Robert?
I'll have a cup of tea with anyone. Kevin, you've lost 4 out of 6 if you count Ansett Cup.
No,
Now, last year you won everything.
VFL side in really
yeah, I know.
let's be honest.
But you have lost 4 out of 6. Are there areas of concern?
Look, I'd like to think that we could be playing better. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I think that even though we've kicked 23 goals in the first 2 matches, but, you know, really last week was a disappointing loss for us. And we've had a really good sit down and think about... I mean, and we'll lose Mercedes and he'll be a big loss. We'll lose Lloydie for a week, but and Gary Moorcroft. But, I mean, we're just got to make sure that we play smarter football. And we weren't very smart last Thursday.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is Joe Mercedes before half-time. Now, he looked pretty sore and injured. He came back on after half-time. What happened at half-time in the rooms? Did you feel as if he'd run his race at that stage?
Well, look, I mean, in the end, we think that after a while he's went from a cork leg to a knee.
Right.
And then the knee's the one.
So, retrospectively, putting him back on after half-time...
Well, it would have been, yeah. No doubt about that. But, I mean, that's a decision I don't make.
Right. The advice was to you that he...
Well, I mean, as far as... Well, that's what he thought it was.
Yep.
I mean, he can only relay that to the doctor, and the doctor said, look, go out and try him and see how it is, and if not, you know, take him off.
Yeah. Look, let's leave it there for the moment. There's a lot more to talk about. So stay tuned, including that North Melbourne vision coming up from Arden Street. More after this.
We're talking footy.
Welcome back to Talking Footy. It has been an eventful week for Kevin Sheedy. They lost for only the 4th time in 44 weeks on Thursday night. And with 3, in fact 4 top-class Carlton players out, they were overwhelming favourites. We talked about Camperelli. In fact, Robert made the call that he's gone from a very good player, Sheeds, to a champion player. I mean, he and Ratton were just decisive, weren't they, in Carlton's win?
Well, they were. Well, look, we tried young Mark McVeigh, and, I mean, look, we're just trying to look for new players to come into certain areas since Buick and Denham and these sort of boys have gone. So, he never played on a champion, but I think he really has lifted. I think he's a very exciting player.
I think we have a look at that vision there, and he's pretty happy about the way that he's played, because I just get a feeling that Scott Camperelli, he'd be one that you would have gone after in recent years, Kevin, as far as making it hard for him, and I think he saw that as a real triumph night for himself, because he just ran and ran and ran and finished so well. But
he can run. I mean, he's just such a magnificent athlete. You know, he's got better, and he's got a kick in his gait, you know, his speed, and then he kicks in, so he gets around the guy he kicks it to, and then cuts back across the other way and transfer play out. And look, it was a really good lesson for Mark McVeigh, because he's really come on for us. And we think we've got a player there, and you know, you get a player out of Gosford, you know, it's pretty good. You know, if he plays 100 games at Essendon wearing number 10 plus, well, we're really happy with that kid.
Kevin, it seemed last year that everybody was playing well. You didn't have any weaknesses. Now, you obviously know it better than us, but this year you've got injuries. Now, Gary Moorcroft is struggling. He is really struggling to get a kick, let alone kick a goal.
Look, I think it's a frustration sitting on the bench. I'll be honest. I mean, look, he really needs ground time, and I mean, what do you do is you get to a situation...
He's got a week tonight, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's got a week.
And then...
She's no goals in his last 5 games. Total kicks this year, 6.
Well, look...
Would have he been dropped this week, do you think? Had he not got a match?
Well, we've got 2 games. I mean, we play tomorrow week, Wednesday on, you know, Anzac Day. So we've got 2 matches in the next 7 days, sort of thing. So he'll be back in probably nearly for the Anzac Day with a rest.
You talked Tim Watson into coming back. Do you think Ken Judge should talk Guy McKenna into coming back?
Gee whiz, Tim Watson, I don't know Guy McKenna.
31 he is.
Yeah, oh, no,
played 9 games last
age
year.
isn't a worry.
OK.
Not a worry when you look at Bradley. He's just an says seagulls there. It's quite amazing that what Watson was able to do. To come back and play in a premiership was a pretty exciting sort of period for our club, and I personally think it really set the place up again.
You still haven't answered the question, McKenna.
Well, I don't know his problems.
OK,
but
degenerative disc in the back, I think.
Well, I mean, it's up to Guy and the medicos and whether Ken would want to.
What do you think, Rob?
It surprises me that he wants to come back, because you saw that hit on him before. Earl Sporting almost killed him. At 31, back injuries, he's got a role as an assistant coach with the Eagles. I just would have thought, well, do the apprenticeship as a coach, because there's a lot more to life than being out on the field. And plus, he's 2 premierships, so best and fairest, he's done it all.
Look, I mean, I've had a better time not playing. I've had 500 games, and I mean, it's been better afterwards.
I think you've had a good time both playing and not playing.
No one has ever said that before to me. No footballer has ever said to me that they enjoyed coaching more than playing.
Well, I mean, you don't expect to have that long a coaching career, so it's nearly double your playing careers. I mean, I love playing, but your coaching's fantastic.
Yeah. I interviewed Bobby Charlton once, and he said, just before the World Cup, and he said, you know, the one thing I miss? I still can't play. I wish I could. I dream about it all the time. So it is interesting.
Well, there's that many better players out there now than when you played that it's embarrassing when you look at your own videos. God.
A taxi driver said to me a week ago, what's Sheedy doing, taking James Hird off at three-quarter time and costing him Brownlow medal votes like he did against Port Adelaide? But what about Nathan Buckley? Surely, I mean, he's got 2 best on ground so far, or has he? I mean, do you think this sort of reaction to umpires does cost a bloke Brownlow medal votes?
Oh, gee, what she said. As long as he's talking nice, it won't.
I don't think they like it, and I think, well, it depends on the personalities of the umpires, and that's just the population at large. But there'd be half of them who'd say, well, there's only one way I can fix you. And I think that if it's a line ball, they'd go against him.
I mean, the old-fashioned umpire wouldn't even worry about it. Brophy and these guys, even Billy Dallo, I mean, they were different sorts. I mean, we're different times, aren't we?
Do you think the umpires are too touchy? There was an incident on the weekend, and we think Peter Matera got 50 for talking to the umpire in the way that he did. Daniel Kerr, we're not sure if the ball did get back to Hamill on the fall or to Lawrence, but look at Matera here, and there's a 50 metres coming. Do you think the umpires are a bit touchy, Sheedy?
Look, I don't know. I can't comment, honestly, can I? I mean, I'll get into trouble, so... But footy's changed.
I think Peter Matera got 50 metres for verbalising to the umpire. And I reckon that's a little bit disappointing because free kick against him, he's a bit frustrated. He didn't show the world, he didn't show the crowd. It was just between the player and the umpire. And on Peter Matera, let me say, I saw him play his best game of football, I reckon, for 5 years at Colonial the other day. He was just sensational.
That's a worry. We've got him in a couple of weeks.
Do you still, Wanganeen, you'd still like to have him at Windy Hill?
Well, I mean, look, every time a new franchise jumped up, we lost a great player.
You didn't get anything for him, did you?
Oh, we got
Did
a...
you?
Well, I thought at the time that the draft and trading rules were wrong. I asked for our club to ask for an ombudsman because Wanganeen was the best play going to Port Power, so we believe we should have got the first draft choice. But we didn't. I thought that was wrong.
He was a forward when he came to you, wasn't he? And
yeah,
he became a great defender.
Well, he was a forward who couldn't get a kick. Now he's a forward who can actually change a game. But, look, you know, in fairness to the assistant coach, I think it might have been David Whedon, said, look, just threw up a comment one day and as you're doing coaching meetings, throw him down the back and see what he's like down there, or on the Brownlow.
I reckon it's good that he's gone forward now because for him to kick 6 goals, Port Adelaide kicked 23, and we were talking on the weekend, who's the best forward pocket or medium-sized player inside the forward 50, Ronnie Burns, Jeff Farmer or Gavin Wanganeen, and we're lucky that we've got 3 wonderful players to choose from, and if I had to pick one, I think I'd go Wanganeen.
You could go O'Loughlin too, couldn't you? I mean,
yeah. We talked about Dennis Pagan, we've talked about him already tonight. Tonight at Arden Street, they've had a intra-club trial match. Wayne Carey didn't play, Winston Abraham obviously didn't play, but we believe they were at it for 2 by 20-minute quarters.
Yeah, that's right, Bruce. They and yeah, it was a tough game. And Dennis Pagan, when asked, what are the medicos saying about this? I mean, he said, look, some days you've just got to throw science out the window.
Kevin, when would be the last time you've had full-scale match practice through the week in season?
Well, it would depend on the break between the games. So sometimes these days you might get a 10-game break, but I probably had it twice last year.
There are some worrying signs, though, aren't there, Bruce? I mean, sausage sizzles and practice games like this. Dennis is trying a lot of different things. Nothing's working. I don't know. What's your view of what he did today, Robert?
I don't mind what he did because I think sometimes our players are wrapped in cotton wool. We're too worried about getting them injured on the training track, so sometimes they never do competitive work except in a game. And then if they don't do it in a game, they don't do it at all. So at least on the training track, you can control that they do hit each other.
But how remarkable that a coach...
Gee, you must have coached.
I know it's old-fashioned thinking. It's old-fashioned, Bruce, but it's okay.
I think it's right. I think that sometimes that's absolutely right. And sometimes the players that don't really do much of the hard stuff in a game, well, then you go there to do so much.
Did they look like they didn't want to play against Sydney, the Kangaroos?
Well, I watched the game, and gee, I thought they got out of the box very well. I mean, they were right up there at half-time, had every opportunity. I mean, the Swans had a couple of more points on the scoreboard, but just their last half, really.
You keep agreeing with Wolsey. I can feel a cup of tea. I can feel a cup of tea coming on between you two.
Can somebody get a hose?
Very shortly. Look, Troy Wilson, 29 years of age. We're going to talk about him after this. Stay tuned.
We're talking footy.
Hope you're enjoying the program. Kevin Sheedy, our guest, along with our regulars Caroline Wilson and Robert Walls. We're going back to the Port Adelaide game. There was some interesting umpiring decisions against Matthew Primus in the first quarter. It became farcical at times.
He got the rough end of the pineapple, I think, Bruce. Several times he just put his body... Look here, he just stands his ground, and for some reason he gets a free kick against him, and obviously he can't work it out either. It is a tough call. He's a big, strong man. And he's got to be able to do that. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing, and he goes to the umpires, and he can do that as captain and say, well, hang on, what's going on?
Do the number of free kicks in rucking contests worry you at all?
Look, there's just a couple of little areas I reckon that we've got to keep looking at just to find out what is acceptable and what is not, and that's one of them.
What about the deliberate out of bounds? We're going to show you Bitterscombe on the weekend for Richmond. He wasn't pinged. I reckon this is about as close as you get to one, don't you?
It was only a slap too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's just one of those guys. I went and saw the Tigers on the weekend. Had a bit of a look because I just haven't seen a lot of Brisbane.
Yep. Woolsey, did you see John Barker showing the ball to Lee Brown?
Yeah, and John would be disappointed with this. On reflection, he'd be disappointed. Completely out of character, that is. And he's already admitted that he did the wrong thing and regrets it. So, yeah, just in the heat of the battle, those things sometimes come up. But Peter Schwab, as you can imagine, would hate to have seen that.
Got 2 goals. Caro, are you intrigued with Troy Wilson like the rest of us?
Oh, look, given hope to every mid-20s to late 20s amateur footballer in Australia, isn't it?
Just terrific. He's so big across the shoulders. He's so broad. He's played amateur football in Perth till he was 24, 25, and only played about 4 or 5 years in the West Australian competition. He took 15 marks in this game. He started on Barry Hall. He went on to Justin Platt, Mark Gale, finished on Aaron Hamill, and he could have kicked 10, Bruce.
How tall is he?
He'd be 6'2", 6'3".
When do you play them, Kevin?
We've got a 3 matches time.
When does Dean Wallace come back? I'm just thinking.
We might have to... Well, you want to coach, do you?
Well,
I hate to say it, but he looked as though he was playing on a suburban ground then too, didn't he, Troy Wilson?
Yeah,
Looked
Colonial's very...
Great effort, bud, isn't it?
It's amazing. Are you as surprised as the rest of us with Wilson?
Oh, yes. Oh, look, I mean, we never had him on our recruiting sheets, so we would be. There's no doubt about that. We reckon that we're not bad recruiters at Bowling.
Well, there might have been the goal of the year and the mark of the year for that game. I mean, Daniel Kerr, the young Aboriginal teenager, took us beauty, didn't he?
Just a terrific grab. And have a look at this goal by Mark Miranda, ex-Tiger. Been out of the game for virtually 2 years. Paddling that ball, that's a hard one to pick up when it's rolling away from you. He finally gets control, comes back onto the left boot and nails it. Goal of the year to this stage.
Tigers wouldn't be happy. 5 games in 2 years for them.
Yeah, gee whiz, it's... Look, sometimes it just happens that you get a person that might get the play right. And, I mean, that's what happened with John Quinn with us. It just the body mechanic in the end got a lot of our guys right.
Your fitness man. We'll take a break, Sheets, and Caro and Wolsey. We'll be back with more right after this.
Tuesday night, we're talking footy.
Well, I think we've all seen double at times on a footy field, and I reckon we were seeing double on the weekend. Ryan Loney for Collingwood and Nathan Loney for the Box Hill Hawks. Now, they're identical twins. Nathan on the left and Ryan on the right, both letting loose with the left foot, both picked up on the draft. Their dad said the only reason I could tell who was who, I used to call one red and one blue when they were kids. Have a look at that. Aren't they terrific? Yeah. The Loney boys, Sheet.
But like the Alistair Lord twins, aren't they? Yeah. Like, it's very hard to tell. The Wakelands, there's always a couple.
I often think that Darryl's playing for Collingwood and Shane's out at Port Adelaide. You never tell, can you? And the bloke's over the fence with the... We have tracked it down. There, which one are you, Sheets?
I reckon... Probably a fairly good way to finish it, don't you?
No, you shook hands before we went on air. Will you shake hands publicly now?
Oh, I've got no problem with that. No, that's all right. Oh, jeez. You see that?
It's good you came on. It's a fabulous Friday this week, isn't it? With Collingwood and Richmond and
well, have they gone the right way? Hopefully the Swans fans have missed out a bit, haven't they?
You don't get involved in television issues, do you, Sheets?
No, just some. It's all footy.
Well, you're on the telly this week. back into Melbourne, and Collingwood and Richmond's on a bit later in the night. But it was a tough call.
And we're up to Sydney on Friday, Bruce.
With Plugger.
Slugger.
Yeah, doing the call with us. Caroline, thanks very much.
Thanks,
Terrific.
Bruce.
Looking forward to
Kevin,
your articles on the
Rob.
Age. You too, Wolsey. You'll sleep well tonight, I'm sure. Sheeds, thanks for coming in. It's
I
been a
thought
good
you'd be
show.
looking forward to my articles in the Australian, or...
I will, because you're always positive. I haven't forgotten that.
Thank you.
Michael Mansfield, what a night for him and the Blues on Thursday night. See you later.
This is one to save. Well done. Remarkable stuff. Historic, famous tournament tonight. The Blues have created some history here.